I never thought my new security system would capture something so outrageous on its very first night. It was closing in on midnight, the glow of my kitchen light reflecting off the renovation plans for my backyard pool. My eyes were dry from hours of squinting at contractor quotes. I just drained my last cup of coffee and was rubbing my temples when my phone buzzed with an urgent alert. Motion detected in your backyard. My name is Heather Lawson, and I live in Pine Hills Estates, a suburban development that prides itself on calm streets, manicured lawns, and neighborly smiles. Or so I thought. Checking my security feed, my heart hammered in my chest at the sight of Karen Brockman, the freshly appointed and notoriously uptight HOA president, creeping along the perimeter of my pool. She wore a pastel tracksuit, her mouth pursed in that perpetually disapproving manner, and her grip on a long shovel made her look like she was on some stealth mission. I watched her jam the shovel into the soil near the new water supply line intended for my soon-to-be overhauled pool. My lungs felt tight as panic welled up. Why on earth is she messing with my property in the dead of night? Grabbing my phone, now in record mode, I rushed outside, not even slipping on shoes in my haste. Little did I know I was about to launch headlong into a spiral of bizarre events, culminating in a full-scale neighborhood meltdown and pitting Karen's iron rule against the might of the law. If you think this is just a minor spat between a homeowner and a finicky HOA official, buckle up. By the time this tale concludes, you'll see how horrifyingly far a single person can push their community standards agenda and how a determined group of neighbors can fight back when enough is enough. Renovating my aging pool seemed harmless at first. Built in the early 2000s, it sported chipped tiles, a wheezing old pump, and a sagging concrete deck. As an architect, I felt compelled to update it with energy-efficient filtration, stylish mosaic tile, and improved safety measures. Eager to follow every rule, I sent the HOA a flurry of documents. Blueprint sketches, material samples, and even set up a small demonstration in my backyard so the entire 5-member board could understand the scope. 4 of them, the rational ones, nodded in approval, remarking that the changes would keep the pool's design fairly consistent with the overall look of Pine Hills Estates. Karen, newly crowned HOA president, turned up her nose at every sample I showed. She sniffed, "This style is too contemporary. Our neighborhood cherishes classic American aesthetics," while flicking through my mosaic tiles like they were something offensive. Despite her protests, the board voted 4-1 to grant me approval. I remember glimpsing Karen's expression as the final vote was announced. Her lips were so thin they almost disappeared, her eyes shining with an odd mix of resentment and superiority. At the time, I foolishly assumed that once the majority had spoken, she'd let go of her objections. A week later, I opened my mailbox to find several official-looking envelopes. Grass violation. Your lawn length is nearly 1 inch above the allowable 2.5 inches. Decor. Infraction. Your front door's color is not uniformly matching your shutters. For context, my lawn had been about the same height for years, and my front door had been painted a friendly blue since I moved in. Now, suddenly, these were crimes? Each letter bore Karen's flourish of a signature, along with a tagline that read, "Upholding the standards of Pine Hills Estates, one homeowner at a time." Something about that line, topped off with a tiny, cartoonish smiley face, made my blood simmer. Still, I had no clue how far her campaign to ruin my renovation would escalate, or how personally vindictive she would become. That midnight, upon catching her literally digging up my new pool supply line, everything changed. I dashed into my yard, phone flashlight dancing across the lawn, while Karen remained hunched by the trench she'd created. She didn't bolt or look guilty. She stared me down as if I were intruding on her property, her face twisted in a self-righteous scowl. "Karen, what are you doing?" I demanded, voice trembling. The hush of the night made my words sound louder than usual. "Protecting our neighborhood," she declared, every syllable dripping with condescension. "I'm verifying that your new water line is up to code, since you ignored our request for a reevaluation." Her grip on the shovel tightened, knuckles white. My confusion exploded into anger. "I never got any reevaluation notice." My voice cracked a bit from the rage pulsing through my veins. Karen gave a pointed shrug, as if bored by my protest. It was in the mail. Not my fault if you chose to ignore it. She tugged the shovel free, revealing a crack in the pipe below. I watched in disbelief as water trickled from the damaged line. She smirked, a revolting, triumphant twist of her lips, and muttered, "This will have to be reported," like a detective who just uncovered contraband. Then she whirled around, pastel sneakers crunching across my lawn. I was left to stare at the fractured pipe, my phone's flashlight catching the gleam of water seeping into the soil. By dawn, the entire block's water pressure dipped dramatically. It turned out Karen's midnight inspection had caused serious damage. Some neighbors approached me, worried, while others whispered that Karen was known for retaliating against those who defied her. Though rattled, I refused to cower. Determination sparked inside me. From this point on, I'd record every last interaction, building a fortress of evidence against her. In the days following that unsettling scene, I discovered new notices pinned to my door at an alarming rate. Improper security camera placement. Your camera may capture the sidewalk, violating residents' privacy. Unauthorized backyard renovation. Unapproved modifications might exist that contradict final HOA standards. Excessive outdoor lighting. Floodlights disrupt neighborhood aesthetics after 9 p.m. I could practically feel Karen's smug aura radiating from each citation. She wasn't even trying to hide how she twisted the HOA's rulebook for her personal vendetta. Infuriated, I began photographing my setup. Floodlight angles, camera positions, yard conditions, compiling time-stamped records in case I needed to prove the absurdity of her claims. My pool contractors tried to push forward, but their tasks were repeatedly derailed by Karen's intrusions. She'd march onto my property, brandishing a clipboard like it was a royal decree, reeling off infractions she insisted were binding. She even threatened to call the police if they didn't follow her updated guidelines, which apparently trumped the original approval. Each time the workers overcame one roadblock, Karen invented another, as though single-handedly waging war on my renovation. I reached out to the other board members. 2 expressed sympathy and mild concern. The rest seemed cautious, possibly intimidated by Karen. Her reputation was already formidable. People joked that she was a wannabe dictator who roamed our streets in her pristine SUV, doling out petty fines. Little did they know she was only warming up. Just as I thought things couldn't possibly get worse, Karen devised a new act of sabotage, one that made my heart sink with dread. It was around 11 p.m. when my security alert pinged again. An involuntary tremor passed through me as I tapped the live feed. There she was, crouched by the side of my nearly finished pool, hooking a rubber hose to a small, discreet outlet. I blinked at the screen, noticing the other end of the hose trailed into what appeared to be a vent pipe. My heart sank. What is she doing now? On camera, I saw her twist a valve, sending a surge of rusty, muddy water flowing into the mosaic-tiled pool I'd worked so hard to modernize. Instead of the pristine, clear water that should have been there, a wave of brownish runoff began pooling around the new tiles. Gasping, I grabbed my phone and sprinted outside, still recording. The sight made my stomach lurch. It wasn't the clean water we'd expect, but a cloudy, reddish torrent that looked like it had been siphoned from ancient pipes. "Have you lost your mind?" I yelled, stumbling as I reached her. Karen's reply was a smug grin. "This pool is a ticking hazard," she snapped, voice laced with cruelty. "Better to flood it now than let you ruin our neighborhood integrity." My fury soared. "By filling it with this disgusting mess?" My voice cracked. I yanked the hose, shutting off the valve, splattering my feet with the reddish water. Karen straightened, eyes flashing with malicious satisfaction. "I'm just doing my duty," she hissed, voice dripping contempt. "When you defy the rules, this is what happens." Then she tore away into the night, leaving me with a contaminated eyesore that would cost a fortune to clean. When my contractors arrived the next morning, they grimaced at the sight of muddy residue clinging to the once bright tile. They refused to continue until the pool was drained and scrubbed by specialists. My grand vision of a sleek, modern pool was now a filthy headache. That was the final straw. Gathering every video clip, every photo, and every hysterical citation, I demanded an emergency HOA board meeting. Even the more timid board members agreed it couldn't be ignored. We convened in the neighborhood clubhouse, a small space typically reserved for baby showers or cookie exchanges. This time, the tension felt thicker than the stale coffee scent in the air. 4 board members sat at a folding table, exchanging uneasy looks. Karen took a seat at one end, arms folded over her chest, mouth pinched like she was smelling something rotten. "Let's be quick," she said, staring daggers at me. "We have real community concerns to address, not petty personal complaints." I didn't bother with small talk. I connected my phone to a portable projector and played the footage. Karen hooking a hose to her vent pipe, letting rust-colored water flood my pool. Gasps echoed around the room. One member actually covered her mouth in shock. Karen's cheeks reddened, but she jutted out her chin defiantly. "You're distorting the facts," she hissed. "I was investigating unauthorized plumbing. Who knows what shady modifications she's installed?" I gritted my teeth. "Investigating by dumping this muddy runoff? That's not an inspection, it's vandalism." A quiet, silver-haired board member, Mr. Delgado, cleared his throat. "Karen, we can't possibly condone this. It's beyond any measure of normal HOA procedure." Miss Fairchild, another board member, peered at Karen in disbelief. "You realize how much trouble this puts the entire HOA in if city officials catch wind?" Karen turned that scathing glare on me again. "None of this would have been necessary if she'd followed the guidelines. She's the one compromising our neighborhood standards." It sounded like a cheap attempt to deflect blame, but her venomous tone could have curdled milk. The atmosphere was electric with tension. Ultimately, the board decided to suspend Karen from certain administrative tasks pending an official investigation. But thanks to a convoluted bylaw about immediate removal requiring a 2/3 majority, she clung to her seat as president. The meeting ended in a swirl of accusations, leaving me feeling only partially vindicated and deeply uneasy about what she might do next. Shortly after that meeting, I hoped Karen's suspension might temper her behavior. I was dead wrong. A few nights later, another late-night alert rattled my phone. My blood pressure spiked as I checked the feed. Karen had returned, this time with 2 hooded accomplices, and they were rifling around the fresh water supply lines that my contractors had just replaced. My hands shook with fury as I recorded them prying at a main valve. Sparks of water shot out and they jumped back, cursing under their breath. I sprinted outside, adrenaline coursing through my limbs, flipping on my recently upgraded floodlights. The moment brilliant light flooded the yard, the hooded duo fled, their footsteps echoing in the dark. Karen froze for a beat, turning to glare at me with eyes that brimmed with hateful energy. She looked ready to spit some nasty remark, but the sound of distant police sirens seemed to spook her, and she vanished into the shadows. Sure enough, by morning, half the block had no running water. The local utility service was appalled at the sabotage, filing a complaint against our HOA. I explained Karen's vendetta, providing them with footage of her repeated intrusions. They stared at me in wide-eyed disbelief. It was as if they couldn't fathom an HOA president orchestrating such mayhem. Yet Karen's rampage had become alarmingly real, tangibly threatening our basic services. Rumors of pool gates spread through Pine Hills estates like wildfire. Some neighbors shook their heads, condemning Karen's bizarre crusade, while others inexplicably applauded her for defending property values by any means necessary. It was infuriating to see how her intimidation tactics had warped certain perceptions. The final blow to any illusion of normalcy came at 2 a.m. one humid night. My rest was disturbed by a heavy rumble outside, strong enough to vibrate the windows. Peering through the blinds, I spotted a cement truck creeping down our quiet street, headlights barely on. My stomach twisted. There was no question in my mind that Karen was behind this, too. I rushed out, wearing slippers and clutching my phone. There she stood, in her usual pastel athleisure getup, barking instructions at the uneasy truck driver. She flapped a piece of paper, likely some phony official order, insisting he pour cement into my half-finished pool. "Ma'am, can you show me a real permit?" the driver asked, shifting on his feet. "I won't risk my job if there's no legal backing." Karen's face contorted with fury, eyes blazing like she'd just been insulted. "This is an official directive. I'm the HOA president. If you don't comply, I'll see to it your company never works in this neighborhood again." Her shrill tone had a hysterical edge that made me shiver. Sensing the driver's hesitation, she lunged toward the truck's release mechanism, screaming, "Fine, I'll do it myself." I yelled for her to stop, but she yanked the lever with a triumphant cackle. Cement poured onto my lawn and spilled toward the pool's deep end. Chunks of wet concrete splattered the deck and began seeping into a drain that was crucial for our neighborhood's flood prevention system. Within moments, a low rumble pulsed through the ground. Pipes that served our community started backing up, their flow disrupted by the abrupt blockage. One neighbor's sprinkler sprang to life, shooting muddy water into the air, then fizzled out. I heard distant cries of alarm. Karen jerked the lever back, panic flitting across her features, but too late. The truck driver cursed under his breath, trying to halt the cement. I stood there filming, my heart racing, as an unstoppable wave of thick gray sludge intruded where it had no right to go. With the crucial drain now jammed by cement, the water lines throughout Pine Hills Estates groaned under the mounting pressure. Toilets and storm drains began spitting out water in a frenzy, as if they'd been possessed. Residents burst from their front doors in pajamas, clutching phones and flashlights, only to find floodwaters creeping across lawns and driveways. Confused voices pierced the warm night air. Someone shouted, "Help! My basement's filling up!" Another neighbor sprinted past, yelling that muddy water was bubbling up from their kitchen sink. Within minutes, chaos engulfed our once calm street. One resident's car alarm started blaring after water seeped into its electrical system. Lights flashed wildly in the dark. Down the road, a man struggled to push his car onto higher ground, shouting for neighbors to help him move it before the rising water could submerge the engine. The sidewalks turned slick, shimmering with dirty runoff that sloshed around ankles and calves. An older couple tried to form a makeshift barrier of sandbags, but the unstoppable flow pushed right past, creeping toward their porch. An ominous gurgling echoed from storm drains that could no longer handle the onslaught. Water sprayed from cracks in the asphalt, turning tiny fissures into miniature geysers. A few frightened kids stood at upstairs windows, eyes wide as they watched front yards transform into shallow lakes dotted with random debris. Floating trash cans, uprooted garden lights, even a plastic lawn flamingo that drifted away like a sad pink ship. Through it all, Karen stood by the cement truck, face pale with shock, as if she'd never envisioned her plan spiraling into such immediate ruin. I called 911, breath hitching, to report that an unlicensed cement dump had triggered a neighborhood flood. Fire trucks arrived under flashing red lights, but the firefighters had trouble redirecting the water. The main drain was blocked by a hardened mass of cement. You could see the tension in their faces as they waded across lawns, some houses already half flooded. A growing crowd gathered, illuminating the scene with phone flashlights. Chatter rose to a panicked hum. "Who's responsible for this?" "It's that HOA lady. They're calling her Karen." Some residents waded waist-deep to rescue drenched boxes of keepsakes or rummage for sandbags in sheds. Others tried placing boards or tarps to steer the flow away from their front steps. The dreadful sound of rushing water and the distant wail of car alarms filled the humid air. The entire block felt like it was on the verge of a meltdown, all triggered by Karen's obsession with halting my pool renovation. Emergency crews fought for what felt like hours to contain the flooding. They set up pumps and shut off certain lines, but significant damage had already been done. Portions of the street cracked beneath the immense pressure. Building inspectors arrived with disbelieving expressions, overshadowed by the roar of machines siphoning water from garages and basements. The main drain Karen had clogged turned out to be crucial for the entire block's runoff management. By sealing it, she'd caused a catastrophic backflow that threatened dozens of homes. Yet the ultimate shocker emerged when the police examined Karen's phone and her HOA documents. They discovered she'd been secretly collaborating with a local real estate developer, piling regulations on unsuspecting homeowners to deflate property values, so the developer could swoop in for cut-rate deals. My pool remodel threatened that entire scheme by raising potential values. Thus began Karen's furious crusade, destroying anything that might improve the neighborhood's standing. Under the glare of floodlights, and with half the block still awash in filthy water, the police arrested Karen for trespassing, property destruction, and a host of other charges, including fraud. She let out a shrill, feral cry, "You can't do this! I'm the president of this community! You have no jurisdiction!" Her eyes darted in desperate fury as the officers calmly read her rights, ignoring her screeches. Neighbors let out cheers or sighed in relief and shock. The kaleidoscope of red and blue lights danced across the soaked pavement as Karen was led away in handcuffs, hair askew, her once pristine pastel outfit stained with cement splatter. People recorded every moment, capturing the instant our neighborhood tyrant finally faced justice. There was a raw sense of unity in that night, a collective release from her power trip. The illusions had washed away with the floodwaters, leaving Pine Hills Estates free to begin rebuilding. If you found this dramatic saga of HOA sabotage and an unyielding community riveting, be sure to subscribe to this channel for more jaw-dropping homeowner stories. Like this video if you believe in standing up to bullies, no matter how ironclad they think their authority is. Comment below to let me know which city you're tuning in from. I love hearing from viewers all across the globe.